And to kind of blame Europe for this whole thing it comes back, this is where I want to come back to this Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. Let me read you, we understand the basic premise of the story is Shylock has lent money to his Christian kind of arch enemy on account that he might do him really well and he might be able to repay this loan if everything goes well. But if everything doesn't go well, then all of his hatred for this being he has the right to enact by cutting exactly a pound of flesh from his breast. And things don't go to plan. And he struggles to make the loan, but in the moment when it comes to the court case, not only can he repay the loan, but he can repay the loan twice. So he'll repay the money and again. But for Shylock it's not sufficient. It is only to the letter of the law that he will accept, and he wants his pound of flesh. And the story gets really quite complicated. I'm not going to go into the complexities of the story, but suffice to say that the point comes when he has his moment to take his flesh, and it is agreed by the court. The judge, and there's a complicated story with the judge, and I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to let you discover that for yourself. But the judge, who actually is a woman, reaches forward, dressed as a man, but reaches forward and realizing that she can't save I don't know if I should call him the defendant, is it the plaintiff? I can't remember which name, but the guy who owes the money basically to Shylock, the Jew, and she disguised as he remembers, or somehow it just pops into her head, not one drop of Christian blood can be shed in the taking of the pound of flesh. Not one drop of Christian blood can be shed. And suddenly realizing that the tables had just drastically turned with this extra nugget of information to suggest that there's this kind of sovereignty that divine connection offers. And you can understand that Brexit was a way of, you see, our currencies are a way in which that we can be held, we can buy into karmic accountability to measure out an acting pound of flesh. In America, the same, dollar, pain. Pound of flesh, it's kind of, it's a way of meting out karma by getting you to voluntarily walk away from your sovereignty. It means something for something. And so by this pressurizing Europe into signing this agreement with Bayer, and remember where Bayer came from. Bayer, his first big success that made it a pharmaceutical success was You also understand that Germany has been this prosperous nation. How do you break a country like Germany? How do you bring it to its knees? How did we bring down China? How did we stop them? We were taking empty ships, like we're doing now. We're taking empty ships full to China and bringing back full ships of their merchandise, but they weren't buying anything from us. And so Jardines invested massively in the opiate industry and smuggled opiates into China to get the workforce addicted to this drug that rendered them basically very weak, and their Chinese productivity dropped, and it enabled foreign imports to be brought into from these countries that were just taking the empty ships to China, which is kind of what's happening now. A lot has been happening a lot, which is why you can buy so many containers so cheap these days, because they're just flooding in and we can't seem to get rid of them because we don't export as much as Nigel Farage is kind of claiming there, I think, sometimes. But when we understand that it was opiates that was used to break the Chinese workforce, ultimately, there was design in the madness. Bayer, their first big successful product was aspirin, and then at the turn of the century they switched, and their new product came in this little bottle. Very, very successful product. And money is a direct link because of its connection to the suffering that the crown has brought about in its relentless war to keep us in this permanent state of war. Brexit plays into the hands, though you may have not done that, though you may have had sovereignty in your heart and your intention for that. What's actually happened there is everything is the reverse. Enormous power has been given to the sovereign of war, which is everything that you do not want to be part of when you're talking about getting past the great dragon, which is Nibiru. But worse than that, the effect it's had on Europe and the pressure that's been put on Europe to be pushed into signing this agreement, which is effective with Monsanto. And this is go back to Monsanto. It's like the one, Santo, saint. It's like this concept of this kind of one God mentality, but not the one God that I would like to think I connect to. This is a God that takes the divine genes of nature and splices them and plays with this divinity to its own end for only profit. And thus Brexit has become this deal with, when I'm reading this very odd book at the moment. I'll show you the title. And it was, let me just grab it. I found it. I found it outside my mum's house. And again, I know, I'm so sorry, it's a long video. I found it outside my mum's house in Glastonbury. And it was, my mum's surname is Mitchell. And once my surname was Mitchell, funny enough. I found it in a pile of books outside her, just down from where she used to live in Glastonbury. And there was a big collection of books. It had all your classics, everything from the Celestine Prophecy to, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, all that sort of stuff. And it had all the kind of like Bible codes and all the kind of like, it had a massive collection. It had all the kind of Graham Hancocks. It was just a cornucopia of all the most wonderful books you could ever get to see, And amongst it, I picked up a massive handful, and I picked up this odd book here. I don't know if you can see it. The Company of White Knight. And this, it's a peculiar story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story right now, but I'd literally been sitting in a bath the day before, and my mother's maiden name is Day, and my grandfather was Day, and he was mayor of Lewis, and he only was mayor for a month, and he was a real kind of liberal revolutionary. He was a liberal evolutionary of his time. He set up the first he set up a grocer's, and it was a cooperative, and it was the first cooperative to try and stand up against the corporations that were just coming in. It was like 1971, just after 1971, when kind of like the gold standard and the silver standard had been dropped, and he was battling against that, and it created, because his competitors had unleashed unbelievable amounts of credit. No one really understood how it worked, and no one really understood how to become privy to that volume of credit or how it was going to work. And so big investment companies that were seeing the potential gains and knowing the kind of like the ignorance that the rest of the world was going to have, especially in England, the ignorance that people were going to have, that the bankers were suddenly going to be able to get money for free at massive volumes. But people like my granddad, who'd worked for their money and understood the old-fashioned empirical value of money, weren't going to understand that. And so they had to turn to all their friends and alliances, and they formed these groups to try and protect their shops, because these new kind of like, not really supermarkets at that stage, but they were like spas and kind of like, and the likes were coming in, and they were undercutting undercutting the smaller grocers. And so my grandfather got together with other smaller grocers and created a cooperative called VG that served to kind of like give all of the small outlets the capacity to buy in bulk, like the big boys, and so they could kind of stand off this kind of aggressive takeover of the food chain. And his shop got burnt down, and he died. And he died months later. They said his stomach ulcer burnt, but actually he just, my gran and all the family said he died of a broken heart. Because he'd been made mayor of Lewis, and all his power was going into kind of these ideas of cooperatives and working with Europe, ironically. So obviously runs in the family. And his business had just been kind of destroyed by that, and the food inspectors, just before this happened, the food inspectors went round his shop and they pulled a load of sausages off his shelf, which were all rotten, and he would never do that, and he ran such a tidy shop, and he believed, and my gran believed, that someone had gone in just before they'd arrived, and they'd taken some of his sausages, which they'd left to go mouldy, and put them on the shelf just before the inspectors had gone in, and so they destroyed his reputation, and then they burnt his shop, and he was just disgraced, and so he died of a broken heart. But it's this kind of passage that we're in this same passage, and we all get the chance to pick up the baton. But Brexit was a way of taking the free man on the land movement was becoming so powerful. I can remember going and seeing John Harris, who I was a great admirer of, and he'd really taken the whole free man on the land thing, and he'd taken the whole sovereignty thing to a place where he was taking it to a new spiritual level. He was talking my type of language. And I was recognising what he was saying. And then when the whole Brexit thing happened, then it all just started becoming about attacking Europe. And if we don't get out of Europe, we'll lose our sovereignty. And all that power was kind of transferred back to the Queen. And when, of course, the Queen went up, as did Obama, and they went into the House of Commons, and she stood there, and she's not meant to stand in there. That was the whole thing about us. Our recognised sovereignty through Parliament was that she had no right in there. That was our right for the commoners to speak. Though she might hold the common land and reign over it, our common law rights of governance came through the common law court that was the Houses of Commons, our Parliament. And when she stepped inside there, she broke that. And when Brexit occurred also on that day, it was... You understand what I'm trying to say? I'm not trying to say that those of you that have called out for Brexit have acted to do this with direct intention to place all your power in the Queen. But you have given all your sovereignty to her by this action. And through this, a great injustice has been served on the rest of Europe. You've tried to blame Europe for all that Tony Blair did, whilst being head of the British government. Can you understand how they spent so much money on Brexit that it was they'd broken all the policies of when you're actually doing a legal thing like this and you're running for government or you're running a political campaign? You have to be seen to be. There has to be there is no kind of like unfair. There's no biasness going one way or the other. And unfortunately, there was so massive. So suddenly, David Cameron was given £10 million to spend on this massive campaign to offset the money that had been pumped into all of the UKIP coverage to make it even footage, because everything had gone UKIP. All the papers had gone UKIP. People were being branded as Ramonas if they wanted to stay in Europe, as if Europe had done it with Tony Blair. Because Tony Blair also took equal footing and was given vast amounts of money to offset and even out the expenditure, so it was seen to be fair. It was a deception where the free man and the landers and those that were talking about sovereignty didn't realise that they were already sovereign. Europe has never threatened to take away your sovereignty. You've unwittingly fed Europe to corporations when you went down this road. And now you stand directly in the headlights of the karmic repercussions of this. And you need to step out of those headlights. You need to, now you've started this thing in motion. The only way you can complete this is, I'm going to read you. There's divine protection available if you can step out of the way of this, of the karma that you've started here. The karma you have started is you have walked this thing that you see as, or you might see as Nibiru, is rage. You have invited rage within yourself. That's how the karma will come out. In terms of, there is no offsetting. You cannot transfer this karma onto the next age. This is not Planet X coming in. This is the hands of the clock coming to last moment of this age and the beginning moment of the next age. You cannot transfer the karma of this age to the next age. There is no transference. By the virtue of what Brexit has occurred. You know, you remember in the early videos I said I didn't even understand how this would be implemented. I just told you. I said, as it was said to me when I'd been shown Britain as the Titanic, and I said, what does it mean? And the answer I got was, Britain comes to a juncture. And I published the book in 2012 about what happens if we leave Europe. The whole of Laughing Gas, it was conceived in 2008. That's when it was first being conceived and written. It took from 2008 to 2012 to write it and get it down to a point where it was a finished manuscript. And the message I was given back in the early days, it was Britain comes to a juncture. Remember, I seen Britain as a Titanic, and it said Britain comes to a juncture. It stays in Europe and weathers the storm, or it cuts its anchors and heads west. But if it heads west, its fate is sealed. That was the message given to me when it showed to me. And I'm what you could call a sensitive. I'm a channel. I spend a lot of time. I have to go away. A lot of myself. I was brought up by channels, so it's not unusual to me. And I spent a lot of time learning how to do it. And when I finally opened the door, I said to my father, I said, Dad, I want to learn how to do what you did. And I hadn't seen my father since I left home because my father was a hard man. Do not think that channels and sensitives come because they're beautiful hippies. Far from it. Very few come from such kind of like comforting, sweet places. Most come through kind of like understanding the kind of ways, through kind of more suffering kind of based kind of like routes. Most come through hardship. Through disease, through suffering, through near-death experiences, through overcoming some of the hardest adversities, to having to be forced to turn to God, to turn to that divine source and open up that door. Most just don't. Most can. Anyway, he said to me, son, all I can tell you is you're not special. What comes to you is merited only by the efforts you're willing to put in, and nothing more. You can sit on the sides, sit in the throes, waiting for special, waiting for something, wanting something to come, hoping something might come. But only with the absolute dedication of effort will you open those doors. And that's what he told me, and that's why I began my writing practice 6 hours a day, and I did that for 4 years, always waking at 5 o'clock in the morning and doing my writing practice for 6 hours. And opening doors and painfully doing, and I was always told, you do half and you write half and I write half. And so I had to do my level of research and constantly put in that level of work to come to the point where I could formulate my questions. And from those questions I would be given answers. Then I would have to do more work to uncover what those answers meant, so I could slowly uncover. And I came from the journey of Mars. When originally I was led to Mars in my discoveries, and I can remember my friends all turning around and saying, Dave, you've got to stop about the Mars thing, it's just too mad. And then going through that process, and also realising that my divine process was actually having to. I can remember going and first talking about Mars when I realised that the water from the Great Flood came from Mars, and this whole lineage of the reptilian orders that came and invaded Earth had come from Mars, and this was how the whole thing. This was the lineage, and that our maritime law, our oceans, are indeed the inhabitants of our oceans were once Martians, and they would argue that they've been on Earth longer than us now, that we are the we are related to our ancestors, but we are not of their bloodline. That we are more alien to this earth than they. This is what they would argue. And the universe has been ruled by two fundamental forces, and you could see them as good and evil, but they are just different schools of thought. One is a war god, and the other is of peace. It exists overall on a high vibration. And karmically, things have been set into motion, and Brexit is not done yet. But unfortunately, the deal that was intended to be done by Brexit has been done. And it is a deal with Monsanto that strikes at the very heart of Europe, that strikes at the very heart of another one God. And what I'm going to do, the reason I'm here is I know the consequences of coming here at this time and speaking this message. But there's a worst case set of scenarios that could play out if I don't. And that stands for you too. Those who think you can sit on the fence. Remember in the days of Brownheads and the Cavaliers? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not place Humpty where he was before. You want to sit on the fence. The bullshit fence between left and right wing politics that leaves you in no man's land where you don't vote. Too cool for your own sovereignty. Too cool to speak up. And take the voice, that sovereign voice that you were given, your right to choose something better than Monsanto, something better than Bayer. You've walked into it. So I'm going to read you the last part of the Colburn Bible. So okay, the first sky monster. So this is the bit from the Colburn Bible. It's just another bit and the Colburn Bible is such a fascinating read. I can't tell you how it gives you such another window on what was happening in the times of. It's written in the sort of tongue of kind of the Shakespearean sort of text. So it's kind of written in that kind of Elizabethan kind of like. In that kind of Elizabethan grammar, but it's kind of like it could tell an older story. I trust very few accounts of our ancient history by our kind of traditional kind of like historians really these days. So I've just got to take everything for as best as I can make it, and I've got to take the various different people's opinions into account. But the contemporary view on whatever it is, I've just got to take it for what it is, and that's all I'd advise. This could have occurred 400. This could be the account of 400 or 500 years ago. We just don't know because we've had our history line so tampered with. Various stages. We've had all of our history books burnt by the Catholics and various different organisations that have just cleaned up the lines of history. Anyone who's shown any sign of intelligence has been removed and wiped out, so there was nothing left to remember. But anyway, so we're talking about the passage here of Nibiru, and it says the first sky monster was joined by another which swallowed the tail of the one going before. Now that sounds like the shield, doesn't it? That massive shield that kind of goes in front and keeps hiding the view of this thing, that it just drops it out of sight. But the two could not be seen at once. The sky monster reigned and raged above earth, doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them to pieces. Implying there's some kind of divine protection up there. And we've seen this shield. Whatever the shield is, we've seen it. And their falling bodies enlarged the land and the sea. So we know there was debris that sort of like fell from this thing. This dragon that, you know, we've got this thing up there. Whether you like it, whether you don't want to see it, whatever it is, this thing is so up there. It's so happening. It's killing millions, and it has killed millions already. It's caused crazy floods, crazy weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, everything under the sun. Do you know what I mean? We've so got this kind of thing there. In this manner, the first earth was destroyed by calamity descending from out the skies. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth the monsters, and more fearsome than any that had haunted the uneasy dreams of men. Men and their dwelling places were gone. Only sky boulders and red earth remained where once they were. But amidst all the desolation, a few survived, for man is not so easily destroyed. They crept out from the caves and came down from the mountainsides. Their eyes were wild and their limbs trembled. Their bodies shook and their and their tongues. Oh, sorry, I keep getting my lines mixed up. This is a terrible thing about my glasses. Sorry about this. Their bodies shook and their tongues lacked control. Their faces were twisted and their skin hung loose on their bones. They were as maddened wild beasts, driven into an enclosure before flames. They knew no law, being deprived of all the wisdom they once had. And those who had guided them were gone. You see, if you are a Brexiteer, and if you are an Englishman, by virtue of the decree of Brexit, you have just walked clean away from sovereignty to give your power wholly and completely unto the Queen, assuming that she has held the chastity of your sovereignty. But actually, the only thing that has kept her from taking all that you are is your sovereignty. Everything that's happened here has served. Brexit was run by the government. It was run by the Tories and UKIP working together. It was a total process of walking you into total corporate control, giving all your power away, not taking all your power back. You were already sovereign. It's the only thing that you can do now is completely stand in your sovereignty. Brexit has been a Trojan horse. And I recently went to a court case, a Freeman common law court case recently, about a week ago. And it was the first one put on by a man who goes by the name John Smith. It was the first common law court held on English lands for 900 years. He makes it possible to do a lot of different things, standing in your common law rights. But that common law right only exists if you can now make a divine connection with God. I know that sounds, because like I say, you have these multiple different things that you can connect with, that you can call God. You can connect with your anger and rage, and that will lead you to a God of war. Or you can connect with your inner peace, your grace, your love, your forgiveness, and your compassion. And you can create a link with a God of peace, a much more benevolent type of environment. And you cannot create sovereignty via law. Because you don't have the power to offer it. You don't have the money to buy it. It is something bestowed upon us by our grand creators. And to those ends, if you're not sovereign, you cannot get past what's coming. If you are sovereign, it does not mean you can get past what's coming. You can imagine me speaking out now saying, you have aligned yourself with this force through Brexit. And that will make a lot of people angry because you feel that this sovereignty that you have belongs to her. It's a terrible, terrible mistake. It's an experience. And this, just coming back to this book, The Company of White Knives, M.C. Mitchell, it's the odd story. And I'm going to leave you with this because it's been a long video and I guess I haven't really said that much and I'm probably waffling on, but the story is that it's a story of a channel who's doing a similar process to me, this speed writing. And she opens up communication with her guide, who she channels through this writing process. Now, her guide is actually a brand new guide. He's never been a guide before, and this is new to him. Well, he's never been the guide in his understanding of his life up until that point. His previous incarnation, where he was living and lived a full life, was with a woman in the 1700s, and he loved her very much, and he lived out his life with her until he died. But until she died. And when she died, it broke his heart, And he died a lonely man, longing for her. And in that longingness and despair, he'd craved to have divine connection to God and to be in service to God. And when he died, he was reborn as a little girl, as a baby girl. He took one breath and promptly died. Immediately he died, he took his mother with him, and he arrived in the realm of guides that work with earth. And apparently he's a white knight, and he arrives as a novice trainee working with the guides of the white knights of Jesus Christ. And he's given these missions to come to earth and help when dark forces are persuading people to make decisions where they think they're going to a position of power. They think they're being swayed to a position of power by taking the path of division. And they end up giving enormous power away to dark forces which work against them. Forces that they are not truly with, which means that they are placing themselves piggy in the middle of everything, because they distance themselves by their actions from both gods, because they betray so much. They are foolish decisions. The warlords encourage foolhardy people, decisions that foolhardy people are willing to make sometimes, and without properly thinking about what they're doing. And he ends up working with this woman that actually he will later find out is his wife from the 17th century. But looking at Earth as a whole from beyond time, they both arrived with the intention of working at Earth at this specific time where she's incarnate. And her mother died when she was younger, giving birth to her sister, who also died. And she grew up longing for her mother and wondering of this unborn daughter. And so you have these kind of two lives overlapping that ends up bringing these two together that love each other, working as spirit guide and this old woman who is his actual lover in a previous life. And this is how they've chosen to work together and to arrive, and this convoluted story they've entered through this complex means, so that he enters through an incarnation that does not know electricity, because his powers of will and his divine connection with God was so much more powerful, and what he developed in that plane was so much more powerful than the fourth dimensional electronic psychic hacks that he would be going up against when he would be working with his love in the 20th century, dealing with high technology mind hacks that were of a much lower evolutionary level than the white knights were working with, that they also used who they claim to work with, God, and his divine power, who also uses at various levels, it describes electrical forces to achieve specific ends, but on a more advanced level than those used by, if you like, the reptilian, fourth dimensional electronic mind hacks that, when we think about 5G, when the signal is, when the reptilian signal, as I call it, the existing signal that has been in place for so long, when this is disrupted, and apparently it will be seriously disrupted during the transit of Nibiru. Now that doesn't mean it can't be put it can't be put up again. Indeed, the whole 5G network is to cater for the disruption in the fourth dimensional mind hack. When that shuts down, when the passage of Nibiru goes by, it pulls away that which is not present by the electromagnetic energy. That's why you have to have your soul rooted deep into your being. Because if your soul is not grounded with you, it cannot stay with you, because the electromagnetic energies of being in close proximity to this system are too powerful. You have to be so present during the passage of Planet X, or you will have absolutely no memory of who you were. None whatsoever. That will disappear. If you are not connected to your soul, and your soul is not connected to you astrally, and you are not directly channeling your soul, and you have chosen a lower vibrational soul that comes in through psychic fourth dimensional hacks, you choose who you wish to be. Unfortunately, through the choices of Brexit, the karmic vibrations of Earth have plummeted. As a result of what has been done and what will have to happen now in the Colburn Bible it says, man is not judged for the mistakes he makes, but for the mistakes he fails to rectify. I know you Brexiteers had good intention, but you've been played. And there is a debt, a karmic debt. Each and every one of us agreed to pay our karmic dues, so you have nowhere left to offset that debt except claim what you claimed you were claiming. You will even now stand in your sovereignty completely. Or you are the Queen's property, wholly and completely to do with as she pleases, whatever she pleases. Your sovereignty is no greater than her wishes upon you, unless you connect with true sovereignty. And only you can do that directly, each and every one of you. You will have to directly speak to God yourself and create an understanding. You can write it down on a piece of paper. But the crimes of the Queen are the crimes of the Queen. And Brexiteers, you have stood behind those crimes. You have endorsed them. Her karma is your karma. She has meted it out. The deed is done. The question is it your deed? There's no easy way of telling you that. You don't want to hear that. Especially Brexiteers. Europe done it with Tony. Evil Tony Blair. He covered all that depleted uranium over Iraq, didn't he? With Europe. Can you imagine when they got him to go, kind of do the whole, you've got to convert to Catholicism and we're going to make you EU president. All the tabloids run it like he was going to be president. In Europe, it was a joke. But in England, it was like, yeah. When you get to see that the shepherd and the sheepdog are working together, well, you've placed yourself in the situation now, as in the moment of Shylock in the court, going to take his pound of flesh, and the awakening of sovereignty in the judge. But you have given right by Brexit for the pound of flesh to be a pound of flesh. How many have died for Britain in these wars now? All those rushing to take the Queen's side. You do nothing maybe. Pretend this isn't happening. And those of you supporting Trump, I'm afraid it's the same deal. These are deals with the Atlantean monsters. And that was the last little bit I wanted to read you was if I can find it, just a couple of little lines from the Merchant of Venice. You know, it was all about what glistens is in gold, and so you had 3 chests, one of silver, one of gold, and one of lead, and all of the suits that had to go and decide to try and win the fairest princess in wherever she was. They've got to choose what's in which box contains her fair picture. And of course some come to this is just one sort of, who chooseth me shall get, I think I can't remember which box this particular one has chosen, but each one kind of comes with a different thing, and I won't tell you which one contains the picture of fair Portia. Who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserve. As much as he deserve. Pause there, Morocco. And weigh, I think that's supposed to be actually pause there. Give a bit of space. Morocco, I don't know. And weigh thy value with an even hand, if thou beest rated by thy estimation. Thou dost deserve enough, and yet thou dost deserve enough, and yet enough may not extend so far as to thy lady. And yet to be afeared by my deserving were but a weak disabling of myself. As much as I deserve, why, that's thy lady. I do in birth deserve her, and in fortunes, in graces, and in qualities of breeding. But more than these, in love I do deserve, that if I stray no further, but choose here, let's see once more this saying graved in gold. Who chooseth me shall gain what many men desire. Why, that's the lady and all the world that desires her. From the 4 corners of the earth they come to kiss this shrine, this mortal breathing saint, this high Canaanian desert, and the vasty winds, the vasty wilds of wide Arabia, as thoroughfares now for princes to come to view fair Portia, the watery kingdoms whose ambitious head spits in the face of heaven. is no bar to stop the foreign spirits, but they come as our brook to see fair Portia. Guess who Portia is? Portia is you. You are fair Portia. And the souls that wish to incarnate within you. You are fair Portia. And these spirits, it's free will to decide who you will be in this new age. But to win the heart of your soul now, to bring in your own divine soul with the weight of the crime that has been done by Brexit and the discarding of true sovereignty by the actions that have been caused as a result of the divides that were fought for you by your own direct ancestors who died for the unity of that so we didn't have to do that again after 1,000 years of war. You have to correct this mistake now on both sides of the Atlantic. Because the crime cannot be rectified after this transit. All debts will be paid at the end or by the end of this age. And if Nibiru has to meet that out, or the intense suffering beforehand, or by you claiming what you said, you are going to claim your sovereignty only by direct connection now with God, with divine, the true divine grace that is peace and love to this universe. You have a judgment to make, a judgment upon yourself of who you wish to be. You're not choosing a side. England. You're America. You're choosing a soul. And for many, you've already chosen. But it's not too late. The day's not done yet. I'm going to assist you a little bit with a little thing that I'm intending to do, and I'm going to open something on the day of the solstice, the 21st. And I'm going to invite those. He will travel mostly by net, non-electronic transfer. He will pass from friend to friend, from love to love. It will give the opportunity to stand, if you wish to. But it would only be offered by non-electronic transfer. And you would offer one another the right to stand in your sovereignty and be heard. If this was your intention to deliver this power to the Queen, then just say nothing. Say nothing. Get angry. Do whatever you do. Deny. Whatever. But however you do it, make sure you put that directly to God, your Creator. No third parties. My advice. That's where you'll find your sovereignty.